Thank you so much for finding the time to be here with us in this IPEX Users Conference. And without further ado, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Good morning, the IPEX users. Good morning, everybody. First of all, let me welcome you to Portugal, to Lisbon, and to the Assembleia da República. I think that for many of you it's your first time here. And so I thank you very much for coming. I hope you have a good stay in Portugal, and I wish you have a wonderful weather. You brought us our spring days. I remember that last week we had a misty and rainy day. All the days were we had in all days a lot of rain, and you brought us with your presence. You brought us the spring and the rainy days. So enjoy it. And secondly, I would like you could enjoy our good and tasty food. Portugal is known by that, and I would like you could enjoy it. And finally, I wish you could feel our friendship. Our friendship. We want to receive you well, and we want to receive you as you deserve. I know that IPEX is a platform for the family of the IPEX users, and we wish that this family can today feel at home. We are beginning the third IPEX Users Conference. Portugal has always been actively involved with IPEX. So let me introduce you our current board member, Catarina Lopes, and our former board members, Maria João Costa, Bruno Pinheiro, and Cristina Correia. And not less important, our current correspondent, Vanessa Garcia. It's there, I think. With so many experts on IPEX Day and all of you, I don't dare tell you whatever be about this conference. But, well, I would like to stress that, unfortunately, our speaker, Mr. Augusto Santos Silva, will not be able to be here in person today. But he has recorded a short video message for you. I call your attention for this. And before it, I wish you a very, very, very fruitful work. Thank you all.
Dear IPEX users, good morning. Let me start by welcoming all of you to the Portuguese Parliament for this IPEX Users Conference, which we are delighted to host. IPEX was created following recommendations and commitments made at the Conference of Speakers of the Parliaments of the European Union in the year 2000 in Rome and in 2004 in The Hague. Since then, we have come a long way. IPEX has become key for the promotion of cooperation and exchange between national parliaments, the European Parliament, and the other EU institutions. It is now an indispensable tool underpinning interparliamentary cooperation and the role that national parliaments can play in the European Union. The Portuguese Parliament has not only followed the establishment of IPEX Dear IPEX users, good morning. Let me start by welcoming all of you to the Portuguese Parliament for this IPEX Users Conference, which we are delighted to host. IPEX was created following recommendations and commitments made at the Conference of Speakers of the Parliaments of the European Union in the year 2000 in Rome and in 2004 in The Hague. Since then, we have come a long way. IPEX has become key for the promotion of cooperation and exchange between national parliaments, the European Parliament, and the other EU institutions. It is now an indispensable tool underpinning interparliamentary cooperation and the role that national parliaments can play in the European Union. The Portuguese Parliament has not only followed the establishment of IPEX since its early days, but has also been an active participant in its development for many years. Our administration, under the supervision of the Secretary-General, has been a member of the board of IPEX for more than a decade now. It is very engaged in the network of correspondence, and we have adapted our internal workflows and IT systems to better cope with the ongoing developments of this platform. This is the right time and the right context to take stock of what IPEX has achieved so far, but also, and most importantly, to get first-hand feedback from the users on how you see these developments and the way forward. You are in the best position to provide such input since you are the ones on the ground every day, dealing with the day-to-day activities of national parliaments. However, I would like to encourage you never to lose sight of the fact that your work has an impact on the activities of members of parliament, of parliamentary committees, and of parliaments as political bodies. As one can read in the preamble of the IPEX Rolling Work Programme 2021-2023, IPEX is now a digital system and a network of people and an important forum for exchange of know-how and best practice, aiming at becoming the one-stop shop for EU-related matters within interparliamentary cooperation. Last February, and to support and set the framework for all this work, the Secretaries-General have adopted the revised IPEX guidelines, which I welcome and encourage you to implement. In fact, the core business of IPEX is no longer only establishing itself as a system of digital archiving for documents of the scrutiny made by national parliaments of the EU's legislative and political processes. It also offers the possibility for parliaments to share news of their work. It has a social media presence. It is reaching out to the academia and other stakeholders, and it has established working groups on content, promotion, and social media and on training. In recent times, IPEX has been instrumental in sharing information on issues such as the Conference on the Future of Europe, Ukraine, COVID-19, or the recovery and resilience plans. Moreover, in the current context in which the democratic foundations of our societies are constantly being challenged and put to a test, I particularly welcome the fact that the national parliaments and European Parliament are engaged in several democracy support activities with third countries' parliaments. For that reason, the Democracy Support Network section of IPEX is a good example of how the administrations can go further in their work of facilitating cooperation and enabling the political actors through knowledge sharing and exchange of best practices of what is being done by the EU Parliament in promoting global democratic standards. For all of this, I welcome the fact that you have a full and interesting agenda for today, covering many of the current challenges of the present, but also looking into future developments. I would like to wish you fruitful and lively debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General, for being here with us in this first part, and we'll pass to the next panel shortly.
Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. It is an amazing pleasure to be again in Lisbon, in this historic building. Basically, the meeting of today is a bridge somehow over time. Just like the Marquis de Pombal, correct me if I'm wrong, was looking at the ruins of Lisbon from the balcony of this palace. Today, we look at the new IPEX, a new project which has gone through extensive technical development, all the challenges of COVID, and maybe the harshest of all the trials it had to face, remote meetings. So we are very thankful to the Portuguese Parliament to have us here today. Always a pleasure. And as Mr. Soares already mentioned, we enjoyed the sun. Maybe some of us a bit too much, but it was amazing and somehow also telling for the Portuguese hospitality, all the warm feelings we are already sharing in the IPEX family. And I hope you'll also take part in this big family starting today. This first session of the meeting will be somehow, as I said, a bit of history, but also the kickoff. We want to make you share our vision, our plans, also your fears, things we have faced in the past, and most probably will face tomorrow and day after tomorrow and also in the future. But it's also a bit about hope. What can come next? How can we make things better? And it doesn't come much better than this than with our distinguished first speakers today. Each individual you see here has an amazing story to say, both professional background and also personal ties. I share, I think, here very long ties with most of you, and I hope you will feel somehow incensed to start the discussion. First, I will just quickly introduce to you our panelists today. Madam Deputy Secretary General Maria João Costa. We'll have Paulo Azzori, European Parliament. Cristina Neves Correa, Assembleia da República. Maria Sundin, Swedish Riksdag. Bruno Diaz Pinheiro, COSAC and Assembleia da República. And Federica Ruparelli, Camera dei Deputati, Italian Parliament. Our first point would be a look to the past, but also somehow to the future. And I hope this will start the discussion. And that will go to Maria João, dear MJ. Okay. Such a pleasure to see you again here. Tell us about your experiences, please, your frustrations, and also if there were some of the successes we shared them. Please.
Thank you. First of all, good morning to all. It's really a pleasure to be again in IPEX Users Conference. I had the pleasure to be in the first IPEX Users Conference in 2015 in Copenhagen, and it was a kickoff of opening IPEX not only for those who for so many years worked hard on the backstage, the correspondents, the members of the board, the members of several working groups, but it was also the time and the opportunity to open and to hear the people that use IPEX to understand what were the needs, what were the expectations, and how the work could be improved. In reality, I started working in IPEX in 2010 in a very cold day in Stockholm. It was January 2010, and it was a working group, a technical working group, where we were trying to improve the use of IPEX, but especially it was technical issues. It was how to upload informations, how to facilitate the work of the correspondents, how to make the symbols recognizable, and how to make them to harmonize their usage. At the time, that was the most important thing, was to facilitate the work of the correspondents, especially because we were aware at that moment that the correspondents were have the main responsibility of making IPEX a reliable tool. And to go a step forward and to allow users to get all the potential of IPEX, we first needed to settle the home. And that was the main task between 2010 and 2015, was to settle the house, to launch IPEX 2.0, now it's already 3.0, but at the time it was a 2.0, to hear the correspondents, what were their frustrations and what were their expectations, to improve the backstage in order to open the IPEX to all the users. And I'm still nowadays a user of IPEX, as every time I need something from EU affairs, I go to the IPEX, first to the IPEX website, and then I go to other places if I need. But most of the time I get information there, where there is the next meeting, with the next conference, what is the scrutiny going on each one of initiatives. And that's what I think IPEX has done its journey to become more than just a database, but really a platform to exchange information towards everybody that works in EU affairs. And nowadays, I think that it's going even further and to become a kind of a home for EU affairs in the online system. And so that's my first words. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is a really good first contribution. Maria João, thank you for sharing all of this. And you mentioned a key word. It's a journey. And I think the journey, both of the MIC and of IPEX, would not be here if the European Parliament were not to help us out by putting a lot of manpower, money, and patience in it. So Paolo, please, continue the journey.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have to say, first of all, that you grow younger every day. All you Portuguese colleagues, you are the same as 10 years ago and still very handsome. I don't know how we contributed to IPEX. I know that certainly frustration was the trigger of my interest, because when I started following it was really a subsidiarity database, and I said, heck, the European Parliament doesn't do any subsidiarity, so how can we really exploit these people, these parliaments that are so active in many things? And there we started thinking, and I think colleagues from national parliaments had basically the same need, how to open up this platform and network to a larger share of information. And I have to say it was probably feeling growing within all parliaments. It was an experience during the working groups, as Maria mentioned, with the German colleagues, with you, Calin, with the Danish, with the Swedish. Everyone had the feeling that it was already a very important instrument, but it could bring all this parliament closer together. And I think we have managed to reach this critical moment, and the technical part, okay, was very important, but I think the competencies every correspondent has are the key factor of the success of IPEX. The rest, it's our interest to have this joint operation together. So basically, I think if we look for apocryph Gospels, we'll find that on the 8th day, Deus criou IPEX, probably. So on the 8th day, God created IPEX. And God is
Gore Vidal.
the God of democracy, the God of democratic institutions, and we are certainly in one of the examples of these changes through enlarging views and sharing. So basically, a frustration that brought up interest, and each of us from national parliaments are so interesting as people and responsibilities. So thank you for having allowed me to learn this and work together with you.
Thank you, Paulo. I still have to underline the huge support. Go Vidalesque or no, apocryph or no, that support was there, is there, and we are still hoping to see it in the future. Thank you so much. And one keyword, at least, from all the many contributions. Oh, sorry, it's okay. Didn't see it. My mistake. Is frustration. So, Christina, how do you feel about IPEX now? Some years looking back, both with your experience as a permanent representative of the Portuguese Parliament in Brussels and with IPEX. Frustration, a bit more, a bit less?
Okay. Hello. Good morning, everyone, and welcome in Lisbon. So my experience in with IPEX could begin once upon a time in the interparliamentary cooperation story, because I was the first correspondent here in the Assembleia in 2006. So it was coincident with the time where European awareness was really rising in the Portuguese Parliament. So somehow European awareness and IPEX grew together here in the Portuguese Parliament, because we had the presidency in 2007 and then back in 2008 the Speakers' Conference. So it was really a time of great engagement. Of course, speaking of frustration, I don't miss my Friday afternoons where I had to upload IPEX. It was really a difficult task. But it was a frustration that you can manage, because somehow you knew, okay, this is the beginning. And one of my main tasks as a correspondent all the correspondents back in 2006, was to make IPEX known. So we had some leaflets. I have the Portuguese version. I don't know if it's some paper leaflets. And you must think we still had the user. I have it only in Portuguese, but all the versions were available. And you can see we still had a password to enter, but we were giving this password to everyone here. And we were going through all the committees, explaining both our colleagues and the MPs how to use IPEX, how to make scrutiny. And so it was really a time of beginning to something else. Then the XML project began. In April 2008, it was the Secretary General's meeting here decided that the webmaster should be paid or co-financed by everyone, by every parliament. So it was really a time where things were happening. And then in 2009, I left the European Affairs Committee, and then 10 years later, or almost 10 years later, I came back to IPEX and to European Affairs. And what I found somehow a platform that was the same, but different. I could find all the information about interparliamentary cooperation there, something that didn't happen before. It was not only a scrutiny tool, but also a tool that enhances cooperation, where you can find everything about COSAC, about the Speakers' Conference, about what news, and that's how I use it today also, not so often as I would like to. But really, you can see progress. It is not a story of Alice in Wonderland, because sometimes progress is really short, and sometimes progress is not immediately obvious. But when you come back after 6, 7, 8 years, you see the progress is there. And it is all the result of the work of the webmaster, of the central support, of the correspondents, and of course of the users. Something I noticed, when you Google IPEX now, you go to IPEX and not to something else like it be in 2019. So that is something I really notice with satisfaction. And well, as you said, the work of the correspondents is also very important, because if we don't upload things like they should, and for that the platform has to be easy, otherwise you only upload them at the end, it doesn't meet the objective. And well, that is all I have to say. I want to thank you for having me here, and a special thanks also to my colleagues here in the Portuguese Parliament who organized it. So Vanessa, Bruno, and Catarina, thank you.
Christina, indeed, I think every single time we had some events in Portugal, there was something really good in store for IPEX, and I see someone who at one point when we met during the Portuguese presidency was still playing a part, and I think we'll see your colleague José Manuel a bit later as well. But indeed, a couple of takeaways: manage and progress. These are two keywords to keep during our discussion. Indeed, managing expectations, managing content, but also managing the way we move forward and the directions we are taking, so that we can consider that as progress. Maria Sundin, some Marias here. The progress seen through the eyes of the Swedish Parliament and of someone who has changed from one users conference to this one today, also the position within the administration, having two different, let's say, opinions, I hope by now, on IPEX. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me come here and tell about the Swedish experience. As Calin mentioned, I'm two kinds of IPEX user. I'm an old user and a new user. I started out as a user when I became an EU librarian in the Swedish Parliamentary Library in 2009. And then I was concerned mainly with getting things out of IPEX, retrieving information. Whereas for the last 2.5 years, I've been working at the EU Coordination Secretariat, where I work much more with putting things into the IPEX system. So I have those two perspectives, and several of the panelists have mentioned the word frustration, and I agree that that's a good driver, in combination at least with the possibility of development. And the Swedish Riksdag and the Swedish Riksdag administration were active very early on in the developing of IPEX. And I mentioned the Riksdag as well as the administration because the political level has always been very supportive of this work. The speakers, the Commission on the Constitution in particular. I think the idea to start with was obviously to strengthen the interparliamentary cooperation by the sharing of information, because having information is central to any kind of influence. And this goes for the interparliamentary cooperation that we support, but also transparency towards users of IPEX, other users than ourselves. For example, librarians, journalists, researchers, and also the general public. When we started out using IPEX, the uploading of Riksdag information was the responsibility of the IPEX correspondent and the staff from the committee secretariats. So they had a joint responsibility. Our internal system for registering EU documents has developed, and now it works in the way that when we upload certain pieces of information, there's a trigger that automatically generates a text on IPEX. And we have worked a lot with agreeing about which documents should trigger these actions, and also how the texts should be, linguistically speaking. What vocabulary should we use? Because it's important to have a consistent vocabulary. So we've worked a lot with with that kind of thing. These automatic texts with a standardized vocabulary makes our text consistent and clear, we hope, and it also saves us a lot of time. I can give you an example of how the EU Secretariat works with IPEX. First of all, we don't only use it for the documents themselves, not only to monitor the scrutinies, but we also use it to find information about other national parliaments and their procedures, which is very useful for us, for example, when we prepare background materials for our speaker when he meets his counterparts from other parliaments. Of course, we also use it to monitor what other countries do. When a committee decides on a statement, the committee secretariat immediately sends the text of the statement for translation into English. That's an in-house service we have in our parliament. This means that at quite an early stage, we're able to share the information in English, at least a summary of the statement, and if there's a reasoned opinion, also of that. And this information is also disseminated in the Brussels Representatives Network. When the information is available in English, our communications department steps in and they tweet about it, and they also provide in this tweet a link to IPEX and are able to use these translations that we have obtained. So I would say, just as when I was a librarian, what we get out of IPEX depends largely on what we put into it. We want to be able to share information quickly in a language that a lot of people can understand. And I'm looking forward to the discussions today to get energy and ideas for improving IPEX. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria, very much for your contribution in this first part of the meeting. So I hope to hear a bit more. Two key takeaways, I would say, like buzzwords: the cooperation between national parliaments and permanent representatives, the need for cooperation and coordination in order to have a common understanding of information, of terms, the way we look at things. Bruno, you have been, I think, the one person wearing the most hats on today's panel. Please tell us a bit about your experiences in cooperation, coordination, and over time with IPEX.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Calin. While I was preparing for this session, I imagined myself in a meeting of IPEX Anonymous. And I would say, I've been using IPEX since 2016. You would say, hi, Bruno, and then we'll move on. Because it's as you say, since the beginning, the first time I dealt with IPEX was when I joined the Parliament in 2006. My first task was to prepare a briefing for our speaker that was going to attend the Conference of Speakers in Copenhagen. And the topic of session 2 was official launching of the IPEX project with the short presentation by the Danish speaker. And I was really amazed because I had just joined the Parliament a few weeks before, and I felt this was a unique project that our Parliament was taking part in. And that's, I think, looking back, when I first became a user of IPEX, because I had to get acquainted with what it was, the project, those passwords, which now for some of us seem like back from the dinosaur age. And it was interesting for me to read the report, which was prepared by the Danish Secretary General back then, that was in charge of the steering group of IPEX. And thinking of it now, I would never imagine, to be honest, that we would get this far as we are today. That's the first message that I would like to leave. Some of the things that were said actually match what I thought, because I would say, as Calin said, I had different incarnations dealing with IPEX. I was first member of the COSAC Secretariat in 2007 for our presidency, and we took part in the meetings of the then now defunct Central Support. Then I was advisor of the European Affairs Committee here, so dealing with IPEX when Cristina was the correspondent in 2008. Then I was perm rep on and off for 7 years, and now I find myself administering one of the pages of IPEX as a COSAC permanent member, as permanent member of the COSAC Secretariat. And if I would divide this into different eras, I would say I had 3. The first one was fascination. I was really amazed that this project, to my eyes, in 2006 was steered mostly by the Swedish and the Danish, and I thought, wow, we are in the Premier League of parliaments having such an important project that will internally trigger several developments, which is good. It was innovative, it had an outreach. Since those early days, Cristina might remember that as well, we were kind of like lobbyists for IPEX because we were going to the Conference of Presidents of committee chairs to explain to members, to our colleagues in other committees that looked at us like we were a bit aliens talking about this website for interparliamentary cooperation. So I was really fascinated. But then came a period when I was more involved of a certain, I called it myself perplexity, but I think frustration is a better word, the one that was mentioned here, because, and allow me to be a little bit blunt, often I found myself asking the question, what am I doing here? Who are these people? What are we talking about? Especially when we had these endless and passionate debates about symbols, about reliability of information, about digital system, about role of correspondence, defining the job description of correspondence, about fora, having fora on IPEX so that people would engage, one-stop shop migration of interparliamentary conferences. So this to say that I'm actually happy that we got this far, but at some point I was not sure what the outcome would be. That's the second phase, frustration. The third phase is where we are now. I think now we can see IPEX as an adult, in the adult age. Because we were discussing yesterday with Sandra, we were walking together during the tour, and Sandra was telling me how easy it is now to access information about all interparliamentary conferences because they're all on the same page. Many of us are still from the days that if you wanted to know something about IPEX, you would go to that cosac.eu, soon to be defunct website as well. Then you would have to go to the presidency website. So it was this plethora of different places to find information. So that's just one of the outcomes. Today, if we look at the agendas of the conferences, IPEX board, also today, we are now discussing promotion and social media. We are now discussing networks, democracy support network, etc. We are now discussing engaging with the academia, with influencers. We are in a different stage of IPEX. And I'm actually happy that we can host this conference because one of the main achievements I think that we managed to get is that IPEX was able to reach beyond its bubble of the usual suspects around the room. If I look around this room, I know many of you from different places, but it's actually nice that we're all here together to discuss this, and I hope we'll be able to come out with a tangible outcome. While preparing for this meeting, and this is something that I haven't told them, neither Katarina or Vanessa, I felt that even IPEX has already a second generation of children, you know, because we are the first ones, and in 2006, all this was being built, but for someone like Katarina or Vanessa, it would be difficult to imagine the world without IPEX now, because it's all there, all the information is there, so I think having such an heterogeneous group around the room today will help us go to the next step. Thank you.
Thank you, Bruno. This was a very compact, somehow, trip down memory lane for a couple of us at least. The times of IPEX V1 or like the dark ages. Just think about forest, where there will be dragons and bears and lions and wolves and everything. And you need patience. You don't need to be bold to go through that. You just need patience, a lot of patience. And I think in German historiography there is something about first, second, third generation. It doesn't really apply here, but we can see the children somehow, the next generations, and these different eras of the fascination, the frustration, and now the maturity, the adult, the IPEX website V3 running. Thank you so much for these contributions. But I want for last but not least, first contribution today in our first panel to give the floor to Federica, because the Italian Parliament and the Camera dei Deputati, together with the Swedish Parliament and the Danish Parliament, are somehow the godfathers and mothers of IPEX, without the huge personal implication. From speakers to secretary generals to individuals in these administrations, IPEX wouldn't be here, and IPEX wouldn't have seen different leaps in quality and in content over time. Please, Federica, let's hear about the Italian and your personal experience with IPEX.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your kind introduction. And thanks to the Portuguese colleagues for having organized the this beautiful conference. I hope you will forgive me for being a little bit nervous, because I'm not that used to speaking in public. So, yes, it is true. Italian Parliament and Italian Chamber of Deputies, it shares paternity of IPEX. Yes, it proudly shares paternity of IPEX. And IPEX, it really is very, very important to us. I wasn't there since the beginning anyway. I didn't know the dark ages IPEX you were speaking of. I have been working at the European Affairs Office in the Italian Chamber only since 2018. So I'm a fairly young user compared to you. And I've been working with IPEX in the last 5 years. Yet in those past 5 years, I have seen it change radically. The IPEX I used to work 5 years ago, it's not the same it is today. It is evident. It has progressed a lot. The website is now rich, more articulate, full of new features, new contents, new tools, and I think new opportunities and new potential for interparliamentary cooperation. About my personal experience as an IPEX user and about the work we do with IPEX every day, our main job is researching for the standing committees who scrutinize the European Union acts. So in the very moment when an act is chosen for scrutiny, IPEX is an extremely important point of reference, because it is extremely important for us to know what other parliaments are doing on a specific subject, what's their point of view, if they are scrutinizing something or not, if there is any reasoned opinion issued, and so on. This is extremely important since the very beginning. And for every act the Chamber scrutinizes, we prepare research papers, an extensive research paper, in which we illustrate thoroughly the content of the proposal, why the Commission put it forward, what its main aim is, and so on. And in these research papers, we always dedicate a paragraph to the activity of the other national chambers and parliaments. And for that paragraph, of course, IPEX is our main and only source of information. So what we actually do every time, we link that paper to the IPEX page, to the IPEX site, to the corresponding page of that specific act, so that everybody can see what the others are doing. Simply. When for instance, I spent most of last year working on the Fit for 55 package, because the Chamber examined several acts of that package. And when I was working on the revision of the emissions trading system, it was very, very interesting to see that the Irish TAS had issued a reasoned opinion on that proposal of directive. It was really, really interesting. It was interesting to know that in the very summer of 2021, the Ireland already had adopted a climate and low carbon development act. It was quite an important piece of information for our deputies. So IPEX is one of the main sources of information in our job. But I think that today IPEX is going beyond this step, is even going beyond this step. It is becoming a sort something else with greater potential, and it is becoming a sort of virtual meeting point for national parliaments, because we are able to upload contents that go beyond the scrutiny, subsidiarity scrutiny, and scrutiny within the political dialogue framework. Today, on the IPEX website, we can find information about interparliamentary meetings, about important events such as the Conference of Speakers, Secretaries General, and so on. And we can, for example, read news about the European Union related activity in the other chambers. And this is extremely, extremely important. We do the same whenever we have the chance. We upload content that is European Union related, but it's not strictly a scrutiny. And that is, I think, one of the most important steps forward that IPEX has taken. It is very, very important. The news section, which, yes, it might be considered slightly peripheric, marginal, compared to the rest of the IPEX, but I think that it has great potential. For example, last week, our Prime Minister was asked in the plenary, she was asked about the ratification of the revised Treaty on European Stability Mechanism. And we uploaded just a short piece of news, just a few lines, but we linked it to the full answer of the Prime Minister for everybody to know, for everyone to know. And this link with actuality, with news and actuality of European affairs, I think is extremely, extremely important. So I think that the IPEX we know today has a lot of potential, and maybe someday he will be walking by himself.
Federica, indeed, if not running, at least walking on itself. So I hope that the contributions we already heard from our distinguished panelists can stir some discussion with you, dear participants in this users conference. We have a lot of very good inputs here, both from the progress of what IPEX was and is today, but also the work of national parliaments. How are our colleagues in the capitals and in Brussels, the capital of the European Union, for that working, using IPEX? What goes into the system? Because we had to discuss also this principle for a while, and most of us have heard this quite often. Any kind of database is only as good as the information we can find in it. So what kind of information are you looking for? Was it really something you had already on IPEX v2, or is it something that IPEX v3 has brought that can really help you in your work? What is it that you're looking for daily or weekly or monthly on IPEX? And then again, what is it that you don't find? So please join into this discussion, hopefully somehow inspired by our contributions now. Would like to break the ice and share some impressions in our first panel today. Yes, I think it's going to be the ritual. First victim will have to choose somehow. And although the room is really super captivating, Estelle, I'm seeing you over there in the room, and I know the Austrian Parliament has been quite a user of IPEX in different forms and different shapes, and also the author of one of its work programs. Can you please break the ice?
Yes, I hope it works. So yeah, of course, the Austrian Parliament is using IPEX in different ways. We have, of course, the part from the EU committees. They are sometimes looking into it to compare how the documents are treated, especially in the subsidiarity procedure. Then we have, of course, the whole new part of the democracy workshop, the democracy support network, sorry. That's the part which is really interesting for my department and my head of department, because the Austrian Parliament started to do more and more projects with other parliaments, especially in the Western Balkans. And we are using this a lot, especially to see what other parliaments are doing, and maybe also with the idea behind to join efforts with other parliaments, especially for us Western Balkans. So that's a part I personally use a lot. Then there's, of course, the news section, which Kati Sturz and me use also a lot to see what's happening. We will try also to improve our contribution, but we are not sure yet how to organize the creation of the information. And I think, and of course, yeah, for the EU department, all the information regarding the conferences. So we talked with Sandra last evening about this. She and her department are using a lot all the documents about COSAC and the other conferences. So I think we have a rather large use of it. And of course, if I'm looking for a special contact point into a parliament where maybe we don't have strong ties, then of course I would head for the correspondent or the Secretary General, depending on what I'm looking for. So that's also good for the whole contact information. That's what I can say about it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Estelle. This is quite very rich experiencing you're sharing, because you're not just looking at EU affairs, but we are looking also at the wider scene here. As you already mentioned, Kati, and you're also working on the international relations, international projects. It will nicely tie with one of the later topics of today's meeting. But it's also about one of these keywords, creating synergies, looking for synergy. Where is it the background that some action, some call for action can start from? Thank you so much. Anyone else, please, Ruzsa.
Hello, so I'm Zsuzsa Nagastasi Szabó, from the Deputy Head of the EU Department of the Hungarian National Assembly. So I can only tell you my personal experience, because I'm only an IPEX user, not an IPEX correspondent. So we are often preparing background documents for bilateral meetings of the speaker or deputy speakers or MPs. And if we prepare these documents, we often look at IPEX, how other parliaments are dealing with EU affairs, what kind of recent opinions they have adopted. So we also look at the statistics and we put it in those documents. So almost always, so it's very useful for them. And the other thing is that we are always preparing every half a year a strategy, a so-called EU strategy, also for the speaker, and also for committee chairs, where we analyze the results of the presidencies, and we make also an outlook for the incoming presidency. And the focus is there also a separate chapter about interparliamentary cooperation. And in that part, we also include all kind of information, all kind of database results from IPEX. So we use it also in that way. And then we have also a so-called EU newsletter, which is prepared every Monday also for MPs, and it also depends what kind of interparliamentary events are taking place. We make always summaries, and for preparing those newsletters, we also use IPEX. So thank you very much, but I have to learn much more about the new version because I don't know each detail, so I'm really looking forward to the other sections of this meeting, and I hope to learn much more about it. Thank you very much.
I think we thank you, Jojo, for this rich input, but also for using IPEX a lot, and also somehow for nicely setting the scene for the next part of our today's meeting, a short introduction into what the new IPEX has to offer, some of the more hidden and underused sections of IPEX, and I heard quite a bit of things about newsletters and programming materials and so on. Maybe we can together explore a bit the right point where to start sharing those on IPEX. Thank you again very much. Dear colleagues, we've already heard these two very consistent contributions. Anyone else feeling like there's something to share? Or if you have anything in terms of constructive criticism, because it's already out here in the open. We've already started with talking about the frustrations we felt over time. So any kind of input is a good input today. I can't really promise that everything we discuss in terms of keywords or buzzwords will stay here, but the names won't be attached to your inputs. Please, Clara.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Clara Ibrahim from the Czech Parliament, and I just wanted to thank you for organizing this meeting and also to highlight the importance of IPEX, because this has been an extremely useful tool for us in preparing the parliamentary dimension of the Czech presidency. So really to have a web page where you have all the information on all the interparliamentary conferences with all the rules of procedure, all the documents from the past meetings, and so this has been something very helpful. It helped us in preparing all the conferences, in preparing the website of the parliamentary dimension of the Czech presidency. And of course, I was using IPEX extensively when I was in Brussels as a permanent representative for almost 6 years to just somehow how to say it, to complete the information I was getting from my colleagues in Brussels. And now I'm using IPEX as this democracy support official in my parliament. So for us, it is really an unreplaceable source of information. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Clara. Indeed, with the Czech presidency, we also launched some of our social media and communication tools. It was the first to benefit, if you want, from a hashtag, a keyword. We have created for the presidency, and it was somehow the starting point we used for creating a so-called presidency pack. And most of these lessons learned will now feature quite front and center with the Swedish presidency. So it's quite something to see the inception point when things started. But of course, it's also a matter of who's using these kind of things. If they are used at its best potential, and also with the questionnaire we'll have later on, which my colleagues will introduce, you will have the opportunity to share some of these inputs so that we can quantify them, to see what are the lessons learned. Where did we do something good, or where are we provoking more frustration, or tripping our users? So thank you for this contribution. If anyone would like to, sorry? Oh, please, Please also introduce yourself and your institution. Sorry, I forgot to mention that.
Yeah, no problem. I'm Jeroen den Hartog. I work for the Dutch Senate. And yeah, I think maybe some of you have seen the election results in the Netherlands. So, with a link to that, to IPEX, I remember like the last change of the chamber, we had we used the IPEX leaflet for the new senators. And to give like a positive point about that is that now with the migration to version 3, yeah, it's very good that we have like can present a new website on a leaflet and also tell where the senators can find all the information. And now that IPEX has become more like a one-stop shop for EU information, I think that is has been yeah of big use for us also for that. So that's what I would like to contribute. Thank you.
Good to hear, and I hope we'll see more, because most of the times from the Dutch Parliament, from both chambers, we are getting a lot of very constructive input, a lot of work, and later on I will also mention another contribution coming from your side, and maybe somehow with the users today and with some of the correspondents will push this a bit forward. Dear colleagues, we still have a bit of time. Please, Marta.
Thank you very much, Marta Dina from the European Parliament. And as I was hesitating whether to take the floor, but as there were so many mentions of the Democracy Support Network, I decided to go ahead. There will be the presentation of the network later, but I think it's really good to hear, first of all, on IPEX also, because my impression, and I'm really a very recent user, and with the network we're trying to really develop it, but how it has developed, it seems to me, from sharing of information to really a community, and that's what we would like to create also with the Democracy Support Network, and I will speak about that. And so maybe for me just to say also that we, with my presentation and then later hopefully with the exchange, it would be very useful to hear also from you, those who are users of the Democracy Support Network, or how we can even improve it even more to make sure that there's all information and that it's useful information, and to make it more active. So I'm already launching something for the discussion later. Thank you very much.
We are really very happy to have you here for sure, and any kind of inputs we'll get today will contribute to our future cooperation, because just in the case like Bruno mentioned, he's the first conference manager to manage on his own one of these mini parts of IPEX. The same thing with the Democracy Support Network. It's the first network outside of the IPEX network to be hosted by IPEX. I hope we are setting a trend there, and the experiences with you are for sure much appreciated. So various inputs, various experiences, I would say most of them sounded quite positive. Anyone still wanting for the last 10 minutes? Please, Barbara in the back.
Hello everyone, I'm Barbara from the Czech Chamber of Deputies. I just wanted to say big thank you all that you engage within IPEX. I'm quite new user. I started as a representative since our presidency, so last summer, and I really want to thank you for this section with all the conferences that are available, because we benefited very much from it. We took good example from the presidencies that were before us, and I would only advise to the coming presidencies to do the same, because sometimes there are a lot of questions, you know, to your colleagues that went through the presidency, but really IPEX is really enormous source of information, good examples. Only thing only one from my side, which is one idea. I would be happy to have some part maybe with calendars, maybe with the overall presidency calendar. So it's like one document that you don't have to really search in the calendar and you can see it directly, or the EP calendar could be available as well, so that you don't have to search on websites throughout the internet. But it's just idea, maybe it's too simple, but thank you.
Thank you for this contribution. I will talk about the calendar and we'll see a couple of things about that. And last reaction from the public, please. Geertz, go ahead.
If it went to the calendars, then I'm absolutely in. I'm among the ones, or our parliament is, Latvian parliament is among those who are not the first runners in the IPEXEUs in everyday life. But the calendar is the one to which I turn the most. Whenever I'm out of office, this is how it works for me. IPEX is the one where you can find the ICMs and other stuff necessary from time to time. But I do agree that at some point maybe there could be some links to EP calendar or I don't know, but yeah, that could help at some point, yeah, for somebody.
Decision taken a long time ago by the speakers. We'll talk about this, but thank you for all these inputs. Now I would like to give the opportunity to my panelists to share some thoughts about the inputs we've heard, the positions, the contributions of our colleagues. Please, who would like to help us round up this first panel? First victim, I will look at you, Bruno.
Well, first thing I would like to say is that I think we are off to a very good start of this conference. I think it was a good set the scene session, this one, especially because we shared our experiences from here, but we listened to many different feedback from users. Hungary, I noted material for bilateral meetings, for instance. From the Dutch colleague, election results. From Federica, she also mentioned the scope of information. The Czech colleagues mentioned the learning process from previous presidencies by having all the information available. So I think if we look at what IPEX is today, and this was a good showcase, it does impact a lot more people than it was initially envisaged. It went beyond the usual suspects. And I forgot to mention that one of the endless discussions, Calin, you were there, Maria João as well for sure, was a discussion on who is the target group of IPEX. It was one of these frustration moments for me. I mean, why are we discussing? Because there was, I would say, two sides. One side of the IPEX board that thought that COSAC is meant only for geeks that deal with scrutiny matters, subsidiarity, symbols. Then there was another, let's say, more bold side that thought that IPEX should not have a predetermined fate, but just develop as time went along and reach out to different audiences. And I think this is where we are today. Not only the Democracy Support Network, but also all the colleagues that in different capacities interact with IPEX. For instance, we had during the Conference on the Future of Europe, there's a section about it. You can actually retrieve a lot of information there. You mentioned the hashtags, which is something that I think you will emphasize when you present it later on. It's something that for me it was new. It's very good because when I upload any COSAC-related documents myself, I now pay attention to the content of that document. For instance, if the presidency has a background note on Ukraine, I will put the hashtag Ukraine so that when someone goes to the website, that document will appear in the search results. So that's really a unique feature. And if I go back to 2006, 7, 8, this was not in the cards. Then one thing that I think we also have moved past, it's the reliability of information. Having said that, I think that is something that IPEX can never relinquish. It always has to be one of the main pillars, regardless of how far-reaching we are, it's that information is reliable. At some point, these discussions were also about, can IPEX replace the informal network of perm reps in Brussels? There were lengthy discussions about this, and in my view, and I think that has prevailed, this common sense, is that these networks have complementarity between them. IPEX is about information which was adopted by parliaments when it comes to official positions, and the network in Brussels is about the behind-the-scenes prior process to that. If everybody talks to everybody, like we are doing here today, these networks have a huge potential of being complementary. So my note is very positive, to be honest, on what we have achieved, but we still have, of course, a lot of work ahead of us, and this reliability is something that, as generations, the new IPEX children come along, that they will have to be somehow educated into. This is one of the main pillars. Thank you.
Bruno, thank you so much. I think in terms of reliability and the information we have on the website, I think I'm the worst and the most subjective judge on that. There is nothing, I'm sorry, there is nothing worse than finding an information which is wrong, or what is more detrimental, looking for an information and not finding it. When you know from informal networks that that information, that decision, that document was adopted, is already out there. This is what makes you lose face. It makes you lose credibility. It makes you lose your status, if you want, in this bubble. Please.
I just wanted to comment on just what Bruno said. I don't think we need to simplify the networks. They work very well being parallel one to the other, and they increment each other. It's like different kind of fisheries, actually. You catch smaller, bigger fish, or continuously you catch fish. So the community, as Marta mentioned, needs several kind of networks. I heard many comments talking about intensive use of IPEX and extensive, massive, very complicated use, so maybe it's time to organize some abusers conference of IPEX, not only users conference, but the abusers, so to strengthen again the community. I think the possibilities of use are much wider, and as Bruno said, we are in a totally different universe of IPEX from what the discussions were on target group or other issues. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, Paolo. As we are really close to the end, any other thoughts, please? Dear colleagues, panelists. Otherwise, we will finish with the hashtag IPEX Users and Abusers. Thank you so much for being with us here today at the very first session of the morning. I hope we didn't abuse too much of your time and patience, and that was a good use of your presence here. Thank you.